On this episode, we learn about the Confluence Project in Vancouver, Washington. Then we visit the Vancouver Land Bridge. Talk with a group of walkers at the bridge. We look at a market street in Vancouver. Finally, we learn about the Arcata, California Transportation Safety Committee. Stay tuned. We're in Vancouver, Washington, talking with Jane Jacobson, who's Executive Director of the Confluence Project. What is the Confluence Project?
It is one project in 7 sites all along the Columbia River system, from the border of Idaho, 7 places along the river all the way to the coast. Maya Lin, the designer of the Vietnam War Memorial, is designing art pieces, and environmental pieces, landscape, tied to the environment for restoration and beautiful art, to inspire us to do better. And so we're standing on one of the places of Confluence Project. There are 6 more along the river. So it is an art and environmental project in 7 places.
So what's the symbolism or the meaning that's incorporated into some of these locations?
Confluence is tied to the Lewis and Clark story, but it is really a deeper and richer story of the river and the people, the tribal people that lived here for thousands of years before Lewis and Clark came through. And it is not so much about the past, but rather the art and the landscape in its restoration is to inspire to the future. In Maya's words, Maya likes to create a place for people to think without dictating what to think. And so that inspiration really does help the participant understand their story, wherever what they've come with, and brings it to the place that they are. All of these 7 special places.
And who's been involved in putting this all together?
We have many tribal partners. We have the Chinook tribe, the Umatilla, the Nez Perce, the Yakima, the Cayuse, the Grand Ronde, and wonderful tribal partners that have helped tell their story through each of these places. Because as you go along the river, you realize that you're in all of these different tribes' homelands. This was a place that people lived and worked for thousands of years, and we've put political boundaries on them, and city and county boundaries, and so we call them Vancouver or Portland or Bethesda or Baltimore, whatever. And we want people to remember that the tribal nation. So the tribes were a very integral part of this entire project. And as many bureaucracies as you can name, from National Park Service to Washington State Parks, Oregon State Parks, Washington Department of Transportation, Oregon Department of Transportation, Army Corps of Engineers, both the Portland District and the Walla Walla District, National Fish and Wildlife, you name a bureaucracy, and we've been dealing with them. The railroad.
And once it's all finished, someone that was to visit the 7 sites, what different experiences are they going to have, and what will you unite the experience between them all?
That's a nice question. Each of the sites is very unique, from the very wet, almost rainforest climate of the Pacific Ocean to the very dry Palouse Hills in Clarkston, Washington. Each of the sites tells a story and invites the participant or the viewer to interject their own story into it. And so each of the sites, the artwork is different. It is site-specific at the Sandy River Delta, just across the river and upriver just a bit. Maya has designed a beautiful wildlife viewing platform that is cantilevered over the Sandy River Delta area. Of course, the land bridge is here. At the coast, we have one of the pieces. She's actually designed about 5 pieces of art there. At the coast in Pacific County, Ilwaco, Washington, there is a fish cleaning table that is a piece of columnar basalt laying on its side with the tribal creation myth inscribed in it. And it is a fish cleaning station. It has a sink, and people come and clean their fish on this beautiful piece of art. So it is an experience in every place. The thing that ties them together, I think, are the tribe's deep history and story, and also the story of Lewis and Clark, because Lewis and Clark visited each of these places. But really, I think the thing that really ties them is that the person that visits these can bring their own story to each of these places and find something that ties them and that they can relate to in each of these places. It's a very beautiful place, and you can visit our website, confluenceproject.org.
We're talking with Bob Friedenwald with the Confluence Project. Where are we right now?
Right now we're on the Land Bridge, Vancouver Land Bridge, at the north end of the bridge. Mm-hmm.
And just what is the Land Bridge?
The Land Bridge is a part of the Confluence Project, and the largest project. And what it is, it's a bridge that connects Old Fort Vancouver and the Klickitat Trail with the Columbia River. That natural connection was broken years ago with the construction of Washington State Highway 14 and the railroad, Burlington Northern Railroad, and their big railroad embankment. And so what this does, it reconnects Old Fort Vancouver, which is a national park, with the river. And that reconnection, the bridge was designed by John Paul Jones of Jones & Jones in Seattle. John Paul is a Native American who designed the Native American Museum back in Washington, D.C. And what this tries to do, it tries to recognize and celebrate all the tribes and peoples who've lived in this area and traded in this area for the last 2,000 years.
Okay, so you didn't take the cheapest prefabricated pedestrian bridge there was and plop it in place. There's a whole lot more to this bridge than that.
Absolutely. This is not the cheapest version, but it's certainly the most beautiful version in our view. It's a bridge that is full of native plantings and Native American art of various kinds at various overlooks. A welcome gate that's made out of cedar and recognizes and celebrates the canoe and the fact that water was a major means of transportation in this area. It's a very special bridge, and it's used by lots of people, even though it's not completely finished yet.
So what is someone going to get? You took the time to take a few minutes crossing it rather than just jogging across. Mm-hmm. What are they going to get out of it?
Well, I think the first thing they'll get as they approach it is they'll get the Native American flavor of the bridge. And then the second thing is, as they walk up from the south side, they'll get a feel for the history of this place. The fact that originally it was a gathering place for Native Americans and others for thousands of years, and then the British came here with the Hudson's Bay Trading Post. And then after that, the Army came to this area. This was the first place for the U.S. Army out in the Northwest. In fact, U.S. Grant served at this post, as did George Marshall right before the Second World War. And then they'll see that during the Second World War, this place out here was used as a general area for construction of victory ships and various other kinds of things to support the war effort. that it's right hard up against the oldest continuously operating airfield west of the Mississippi River, which is Pearson Air Park. And it's also right across from Old Fort Vancouver, which is a national park, which was the original Hudson's Bay trading post.
We're in Vancouver, Washington, talking with Jan, Jenny, and Christine. What were you folks doing here this afternoon?
Going for a walk. Just going for our regular Monday walk.
So y'all walk together every Monday?
Yep.
So what do you like about walking right around here?
We have a loop, and it meets our needs time-wise, and the scenery's good. We get a little bit of the river, we get some real quiet neighborhoods, we got a little piece of a hill, and the distance is perfect. So, and you can't beat this view.
So what role does the land bridge here play in your loop?
Well, if we didn't have the land bridge, we'd probably have to walk all the way downtown, and then it might be too long. You know, we might have to go farther than we wanted in order to get back across the highway and stuff. So it's providing a nice route, and like she said, it's got a great view, and it's beautiful.
Beautiful. Gives us direct access from the beauty of the fort right down to the beauty of the river. And it adds a lot of walking potential to this area. We didn't have a lot of really great long walks in this area.
And you say this bridge formed an important connection for you. What else could be done to make it a little easier for people that, like you, trying to get out and walk for a little exercise?
Well, I think more of these kinds of connections over busy intersections. That's the main thing. You know, any busy intersection or freeway like this, we need ways to get across them. The Padden Parkway up there has helped us a lot. I don't know if you know about that, but it's another bridge over the freeway. It's made a big difference. And before that, the city was chopped up by these two freeways, so it makes a big difference for getting around.
Bathrooms are great, water's great for bikers and walkers,
Yeah.
especially women.
We're talking with Todd Boulanger, who's a senior transportation planner with the city of Vancouver, Washington. Where are we?
We are on Esther Street, next to the Northwest's oldest park at the Esther Short Park. And the unique feature of this street behind us is that it was basically converted from a 1910 street with your traditional sidewalk and curb into a market street. Currently it is about 60 feet wide with a parallel parking lane, diagonal parking lane, and about 30 feet of travelway. Now what the unique feature is of the street is inverse crown. So instead of being humped in the middle, it's low in the middle. So all the drainage goes into the center. You can see the drainage grate behind us. Some of the other unique market features. So on the weekend, the street becomes a public plaza of sorts. We have hundreds of vendors with local food, wares, and crafts, and each stall is marked with a little brass survey marker. In addition, many of the stalls have remote power and utility hookups in basically a J-box in the cement of the sidewalk. So basically, there are no longer any utility cords or water lines or wastewater lines that would trip up a pedestrian and possibly cause a barrier to a person in a wheelchair or just be an eyesore. So right now we have typically about 3,000 to 5,000 people a weekend here, and maybe 15,000 on opening day if the weather is like this. As your viewers may notice, the traffic passing behind us hasn't been traveling at 25, 30, or 40 miles an hour. The pedestrian design elements have brought the traffic down to probably about 15 miles per hour. The roundabout at one end and the kind of the blended nature of the sidewalk area that kind of continues into the street. Most drivers respect that, and they drive accordingly.
How difficult is it to transform your traditional kind of street into one specialized for a farmer's market like this? Was it a big challenge, or was it just a matter of spending a little money?
Well, it was all of the above. I mean, you have to have the will and the intent. I mean, this street 10 years ago was basically a truck route. Before we installed the roundabout at the south end, it was basically it was between the A, which was the industrial area to the west, and the B, which was the interstate highway, I-5, our NAFTA corridor. And so prior to that, we had to decide where the freight traffic would go. We had to decide that this park would no longer be a derelict eyesore where hobos would camp out. We had to reinvest in the housing all around it. And at that time, we had the kind of the critical mass of the shoes on the street, the pedestrians, the walkers, the shoppers. The farmers market used to be in this little corner tucked under the interstate highway. Bad pedestrian flow, bad energy, just wasn't a great place being under the whine of the traffic. So once we decided we wanted to improve the place, once we decided we could manage the vehicular traffic or share it with another street, then we had to look for money. And the money came from a federal block grant, because at that time this was a low-income, moderately depressed area, which that will change with the next census. Redevelopment, city funding, bonds, private investment all came into line, and building 8 and 10 and 5-story buildings behind us. So we had to have the people, we had to have the will, we had to have a very good street grid network so that traffic could be shared and moved between other streets, and we had to have the investment in private and public dollars.
How important are farmers markets to a town or a city?
Well, for Vancouver, speaking of Vancouver and the other communities I've lived in, the farmers market is, in a sense, it activates public places. So if you have a public space and you want to bring people to it relatively easy before you make the investment, bring food. Relationships with the farmers. This is assuming you don't have 5, Whole Foods on that block anyway. I mean, Vancouver's really had it tough, and it has it even tougher now. When I moved here 9 years ago, there were 2 or 3 older markets in the downtown, kind of the last remnants of the 1950s, places that had been open since the 30s. They're all gone now. They were driven out of business by neighbors that didn't want, 40-ounce liquor stores. Demographics have changed, and yet the big markets haven't really come into the downtown yet. So we have a market. The next supermarket is about 2 miles that way. We used to have 2 markets 1 mile across the state line, across the bridge over there. Now we have 1. And we have we have 2 liquor stores, or 2, I should say, gasoline stations with food. And that's about it in the downtown right now, other than the farmers market. Our farmers market operates between, it ends in October, reopens in March. And so for about half the year, we have great food and vegetables here, all naturally grown. What you see behind us, the building to my left, was our attempt at kind of a Pike Place market, kind of an everyday farmers market with restaurants and food stalls and a butcher. Our Vancouver Public Housing Authority built it as part of this workforce housing here. And it worked rather well for a few years, but the demographics and the market association couldn't afford the rents. And so sadly it's been closed, and it'll become a gym and a bank. So we're kind of we stepped 2 steps ahead and we've stepped 1 back, but we're still working on getting more food down here.
We're talking with Peggy Martinez with the City of Arcata Transportation Safety Committee. What is the committee?
Well, the committee is comprised of 7 people, and our function is to give input to the City of Arcata Public Works Department about different projects that they're working on, how those projects affect pedestrian safety, how they affect bicycle safety, and traffic calming. Those are the three major areas that we really focus on.
What are some of the issues you deal with that affect pedestrians?
Well, we work on sidewalk width and curb cuts and overhangs and trip hazards and things that come up, like if bushes are growing out over a particular person's property, we let the city know, or we talk about it during the committee, and then the city comes and the city does something, or there's a private group that takes care of some of that stuff, or else we ask the people to do that, and so that kind of thing. And we work on slowing cars down. We work on making sure that when people are walking, they have safe paths of travel. So it really ranges, but one of the biggest things we do is listen to Arcata residents talk about how how motorists drive too fast in their neighborhood. That's a really big thing we do.
What's been your personal experience with pedestrian safety?
Well, with pedestrian safety, I am often concerned about obstructions. I encounter obstructions and overhanging limbs and things, obstructions, things that are kind of in the way, whether it be cars that are blocking the sidewalk. Sometimes street furniture, businesses will have things in front of their businesses to advertise, but those things like sandwich boards and signs are often directly in the center of the path of travel. So I just have to negotiate that, and anyone does, any pedestrian does, but those are some of the things that I encounter.
And you had an unfortunate encounter with a car a while back. What happened?
Well, I've had several, actually. I've had several encounters with automobiles. I've been, bumped and moved and pushed and tapped by cars many times. The most recent accident was in Eureka, very close to the City Hall on 6th Street and K, which is a four-way intersection, but 6th Street runs east and west. Well, it runs west. It's a one-way street heading west. And I was walking east, and I was on the north side of 6th, and I was just about to cross K, and a motorist was turning to the right, going west on 6th, and he turned left with I guess he looked left, but didn't look back right again. And I was in the crosswalk, and he hit me with his car and knocked me over, and it was very frightening and traumatic and shocking. I actually I felt it was coming right before it hit me. I heard him. He wasn't going very fast, yet it did still jar me considerably, and I had damage to one of my knees and to my shoulder, and it was he was really upset by it, and I was upset as well, and basically the upshot was that he said he had insurance. He didn't. I received no compensation at all for the accident. He's unemployed. He has no money. It would have been pointless to take him to small claims court. So I guess the reason I'm talking about it here is just to ask that motorists please consider, when they're driving, they please consider pedestrians and how their cars can, how the weight and the mass of a vehicle can really affect the human body, the human frame, the skeletal system. We're very fragile, actually. So it affected me quite a lot, and I, as a person who doesn't drive, who can't drive, was sort of, called upon, if you will, to get back out and continue walking and doing what I do. I have a small business. I'm a contractor. I do computer instruction, and I visit clients a lot. I walk in my daily life for transportation. So I really need, it was sort of forced upon me, if you will. But it was in my interest to sort of come back out again and resume and begin walking on those same streets and crossing that same intersection, with the knowledge that I'm again vulnerable to motorists who may or may not be paying attention. And well, I don't think the person intended to do it. I think it was an accident. At this date, I feel fairly strong. I'm in good physical condition, which is a huge, huge help to me. Not all pedestrians are. I think had that happened to someone in different circumstances, that person could have been far more seriously injured. It is important enough to talk about in this setting to you and to a journalist who's or a documentarian, if that's a word, to bring it forth to motorists to take care and consider what they're doing and slow down and pay attention and teach your kids when you're teaching them to drive to really, really take note and be alert.
Visit us on the internet at www.pedestrians.org.